Today we're going to talk about different sampling techniques that we can use to sample a population. And one reason why we want to have different sampling techniques is we can't always study the entire population. So imagine if we wanted to survey all of Ontario to talk about which political parties should be elected next year. It would be very impossible to get every single eligible voter for that. So one of the things we have to do is we have to look at a sample. And a sample is a subgroup of individuals from the population. And we use a sample when the population is too large or too difficult to survey. So similar to the example that we just talked about, the idea of surveying all of Ontario. So example one, if we wanted to, using ENSSS as our population, what are some subgroups that we can have? So we can separate them by, we can separate the school into groups of grades. So we can talk about grade 9 to 12 as one subgroup. We can take a look at maybe splitting them up in gender, maybe talking about the pathway that people are going to want to take when they leave ENSS. And there's many other pathway or other scenarios that it could take. It could be people that separate them between people that take the bus or that they walk or they drive. So we can select them into different subgroups. All right, and then we can choose a sample from that. So there's different types of sampling techniques, and what we're trying to look at here is I should be able to determine the type of sampling technique used for the description of the scenario. So if I give you a scenario, I should be able to say it's systematic. It's a simple random based on the information that's given. So a simple random is fairly straightforward. The idea there is I randomly choose a specific number of people to do the survey. So for example, if I was looking at, I can say pick names out of a hat. Maybe I have a random name generator. All right. So kind of like what we do with our random groups to work up on the boards. Works the same way. Completely random. No bias to that as well. So it's very unbiased. Systematic. The idea of a systematic is it puts the population in some sort of order and then chooses people at regular intervals. So maybe our order could look like it's in alpha order. And then I choose every fifth person on that list. And whatever that interval is, that's fine. But the idea there is there's some sort of system to figure out which names to choose. All right. The third one is called a stratified sample. So we divide the population into groups with the same proportions as those groups in the population. All right, so what I end up doing is taking a look at each of the groups I want to pick, and I want to take equal proportions of those. For an example here. Another way of saying is I'm taking a percentage of each group. That's another way of saying that. So if I want to do this, if I want to take 20% of the school population with a stratified sample, What I can do is I can take 20% of each group, and the number of people that I pick is still going to be in the same proportion as the ones I pick here. So for example here, I can look at 20% of 175, 20% of 200, 20% of 225, 20% of 275, and I can get those answers. So I think this ends up being 35, 40, 45, and 55. These numbers are still proportional. That means that they have the same weighting for each scenario. So that's an example of that. The next one we're going to take. So the next one we're going to talk about is a cluster sample. So we divide the population into groups, very similar to the one that we did with stratified, and we randomly choose a number of groups, sample each member in that group. So what I can do is I can set it up as grade 9, 10, 11, and 12, and then I decide to sample all of the grade 9s. That's what we're kind of looking at as a cluster. So this cluster here is going to represent the entire population. That's what we're looking at. Multi-stage sample is, again, we divide the population into groups, but we're going to divide them into a hierarchy. We're going to divide them into a hierarchy. And the question is, what does a hierarchy look like? And the idea there is a system that kind of flows down from the top to the bottom. So if I was looking at a business, okay, and my business could look like, here at the top I have the owners, and then maybe you have our VP, and then each VP has managers, and then each manager has to look at the different workers. All right, so this is what a hierarchy is. And then I take a random sample of each. So maybe I look at 10 different businesses. I survey the different VPs from the different managers of the different workers. And that's what a hierarchy looks like. So it's a multi-stage sample where the multi-stage is the different levels of the hierarchy. All right, so I have different levels within. A voluntary response sample allows participants to choose whether to participate or not participate. So they give a voluntary response. So that could look very different. For example, it's an invitation. So we're inviting people to take a survey. So the idea there is, you've seen at school where we have EDSB polls, all right? So it's an invitation to invite people to participate. Maybe you've seen restaurant surveys. They're asking people to take a survey about their service and put you in a draw for $500. That would be a voluntary response because we're inviting people to participate into that scenario. A convenience sample. It chooses individuals from the population who are easy to access. So a way of saying that is that the survey is I don't know, is presented to, it kind of goes out to those people. So how do we easily access these people, all right? So maybe at ENSS, we look at Four Corners, all right? We just pull people from Four Corners to do that survey. It could be maybe, see, if I have a telemarketer calling you, all right? It's not convenient in the sense that you have to do the survey, but they're calling you to reach out to that. So as we look at these 7 types of distributions, there's always going to be bias in this. And you can tell that if I was doing a convenient sample, there's going to be some bias in the data that you pick. Maybe there's going to be a bias in voluntary or bias in cluster. And we're going to talk about those biases in the next lesson, but that's what we're looking at. So on this next page are some scenarios, all right? What I want you to do is push pause, and I want you to take some time to identify which of the 7 samples that we have. So we know we have a random one, we have a systematic one, we have a multi-stage, we have a stratified, we have a voluntary, we have a convenience, and we have a cluster. So your job is try to figure out which of those match for those. So I'm going to push pause. I want you to push pause and try to fill in what you think that is. All right. So I'm going to go through them, and then I'll talk about the reason why. So as you're copying this down, try to write down some of the reasons why. So the first one, you want to find out if your town is in favor of allowing cannabis sales to occur in your town. You walk and ask everyone on your street. Most of it is convenience. The idea there is you are going out to answer the survey, apply the survey to people. All right, so I'm walking out to that. All right, so I'm convening the person taking the survey. All right, second one. The university is polling students about opting out some medical coverages. It selects 200 students at random in the same proportions as the enrollment in each department. Hopefully you said stratified, and hopefully you saw the same key word here is proportion. All right, so the same proportion in each department. So you have specifically picked a number from each department that has the same ratio. There are 265 curling clubs in Ontario. The Ontario Curling Association is creating a new logo and selects 10 curling clubs and surveys every member in each of those clubs. That is a cluster. So we're saying that the 10 curling clubs are going to represent every member, a cluster. Coach puts names down in a spreadsheet and randomly selects 3 students for 3 tickets to the basketball game. All right, hopefully you said that was simple random. The idea there is there's no order, all right? It's just pick 3 at random. A questionnaire is sent out to every 9th person on the alphabetical list of a store's credit card customers. Systematic. The idea there is the ratio of people I'm picking is occurring at a regular interval. All right, so here I have an order, and this is the regular interval that I'm happening at. School council invites all students to provide ideas for extracurricular activities. Voluntary. Keyword, invites. You're inviting students to take your survey or provide ideas. Marketing firm wants to collect information on certain products. They randomly selects 10 neighborhoods, and then each neighborhood they randomly select 5 streets, and on each street they randomly select 20 households. A multi-stage. So what they're done is they've taken the neighborhood, and they went to they did 10 neighborhoods, and then every neighborhood they're doing 5 streets, and then they're doing 20 houses on those 5 streets. So if we were looking at what is the thinking that we need to feel good about, all right, if I'm looking at these, if I'm looking at what's the best thing here, classify the sampling method used in each scenario. So can I read these and ask ourselves which of these represents a sampling technique? I am not asking you to remember the names. I am asking you to apply that thinking to the questions that, the scenarios that are occurring. Okay, so give the practice a go, and we'll talk soon.